I use all different kinds. So like telling you guys about this, about Twitter specifically today. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. Kim and Ramona are going to be monitoring the chat, and they'll stop me if any of the questions are important in the moment, or if they can wait to the end and I can answer them. But feel free to ask anything. Hopefully I know the right answer for it. If not, I'll find out and then get back to you. But yeah, today I'm going to be talking about Twitter for Business. And the first thing I want to get into is the basics of Twitter, just to make sure that everyone has the general basis for understanding what I'm going to go into today. So one of the first things I want to talk about is your Twitter profile. Now, this is a screenshot from Twitter for desktop. It's going to be a little different if you're on your mobile, but the main difference is it's just going to be more compressed. So for example, on the right side, you see who to follow. That's going to be in the center of your feed instead of on the right side. And you're not going to get a big profile picture like on the left side. But overall, it's going to be pretty similar. So you're looking at this page, you can see the bio, and below the name Dan McConnell is his @ or like his name that you will search to find Dan McConnell. And then Twitter for desktop is a little different than mobile and a little better in some senses, as it'll tell you how many tweets you've sent out, how many pictures and videos you have, as well as your favorite tweets. But you can still see how many people are following you and how many people you're following on the mobile version. Other than that, we're going to move to the next slide just to talk a little bit more about the layout of Twitter before we get into more information. So this is what your general timeline is going to look like. It's not going to be super different if you're on mobile once again, but all those icons on the left side will be condensed along the bottom bar on the mobile version. And I'm just going to quickly go through what all those different icons mean. So on the left, you see the home button, and in the center, that's your home feed. So it's going to be all the different people you follow and different interactions people you follow have had with different accounts on Twitter. The Explore page, that can also be seen on the right here in this screenshot. So that has all the different trending stuff that's happening. And Twitter is really interesting because it's way different than Instagram and Facebook in the sense that Twitter is constantly moving, and I'll get into that more later, and how you can really utilize Twitter's constant news cycle to your advantage, and also how it's a disadvantage at times. But you can see like right now, or in this screenshot, world news is trending. And this will give you a glimpse into what everyone's talking about on the website, as well as like what maybe you could join for a different type of conversation. Then you go into notifications. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It'll tell you about who's retweeted or liked your tweets or who has followed you. Then you have messages, which are your DMs from different people or direct messages. Then bookmarks. So sometimes you'll see a really cool tweet that maybe it has some cool information you want to come back to, or you just thought it was really inspirational and you can bookmark the tweet so you can come and look at it later. Lists is one really cool feature that I actually didn't know about before I started looking into this presentation. And there's lots of possibilities with lists, but essentially you can click on lists and create a category or list of up to 25 different accounts that you want to follow or you want to look at. So say if I have a list of 25 people who follow my business and who are repeat customers, well, I can specifically use that list to see, oh, what are they talking about? What are they looking at? What are they retweeting? To sort of tailor my marketing on Twitter and my different social media accounts. And you can use it in different ways, such as looking at competitors, or even if you're just like, hey, I want a list for all of the people who do hockey breaking news, for example. Say if you want to look at like Hockey Insiders or something like that. So there's just a lot of different possibilities when it comes to using these different features. And then I'll just quickly go through the last three on the left. So profile, again, that takes you to the last page we were talking about. And then you have more, which will be your more in-depth options about what you can change on your profile and so on. And then finally, tweet. And that's obviously the main thing you want to do on Twitter is tweet and join in on the ongoing conversation that is happening. Next, we're just going to go over some of the key terms that I want you to know for this presentation. Some of them, again, are pretty out there, I guess, because I didn't even know what some of them were, and some of them are really important when it comes to Twitter. So this is one of the main things I want to harp on during this presentation is Twitter is a search engine. So a search engine is what Google, Bing, and all those different websites you go to search for different topics is. And this really ties into using it to look at the hashtags and what's trending and so on. And again, I'll get into that more later, but this is really where it comes down to Twitter being the biggest tool when it comes to marketing. And then SEOs, this ties right into search engines. So SEO stands for search engine optimization. And what this means is, for example, if you're going to optimize a search engine for your business, you might set up a Google business account, and using Twitter as a search engine, you want to optimize your searches on Twitter, as well as a hint to what we're going to talk about later. Twitter also helps you show up on different search engines. Now, when it comes to characters, this is another key thing on Twitter, because you only have 280 characters. So this includes spaces and letters. So you really got to be careful about where you're talking, like how you're phrasing different things, but also it benefits you in different senses as well, just because you got to get straight to the point and people aren't going to be constantly rambling on about different things. Impressions, this is essentially the currency on Twitter in a sense. What I mean by that is when you send out a tweet, you want to see how many interactions you're getting and how well that tweet's doing. You're going to want to check the impressions. This means how many people have seen this tweet and essentially how effective this tweet has been. And then finally, threads. This ties into the characters when it comes to Twitter, because you only have 280 characters, but sometimes you might want to tell a story about something that happened at your store, or you just want to write about a lot of different things that are sort of interconnected and you don't want them to get lost on someone's timeline. So when you create a thread, you can create a bunch of different 280 character tweets that are all connected together. So when someone sees your tweet, it's going to say show thread underneath it. And instead of them seeing like part 1 here, part 2 an hour later or whatever, because it got lost in their timeline, it's all going to stay together and in chronological order to make sure they're getting this information. So I quickly just wanted to put this meme on the slide, because sometimes abbreviations aren't fun and are just hard to understand. And I just thought it really related to the topic of terminologies. So moving on, and we're just going to go through these last ones, then we're going to get, oh wait, no, sorry, we actually have a couple more. But again, this is just really important. But anyways, so tweets are just what you send out on Twitter, right? Those are your messages. Now a retweet is when you essentially share a post. So just like Facebook, you can share what other people have said, and you can either retweet it without making a comment, or you can quote tweet it, which means sharing it with a comment. A mention is when you like tag someone in a post. So again, connecting this to Facebook, if I'm like, hey, like today I had a really good presentation, Ramona Gallagher was there. So on Twitter, I would at Ramona and whatever her username is. And then when it comes to engagement, this is how many people are interacting with your posts. They're sharing it, retweeting it, liking it. And another neat thing about Twitter is when it comes to your character count, there's a thing called the feed URL shortener. So say if I just want to go to a website and I found a really cool article, well, usually that website link's going to be super long, and Twitter automatically shortens it, I believe, to 23 characters no matter what. Say if it's a link that's 5 characters, it's still going to use up 23 of your characters. And then finally, a trend. This is like one of the biggest things on Twitter. Again, it's what's trending, what's happening, what is really popular right in this moment, and what people are talking about. And now this is sort of the meat of Twitter terminology. Bots are really annoying accounts, essentially, that are just run by computers. No one actually runs these accounts. Usually you'll see them talking about different topics, especially politics. We won't get into that, but they'll just be tweeting out different links and stuff like that. Sometimes they'll be under big accounts, constantly sending out links to like different stores and so on. And a lot of the time they're viruses and stuff like that. So usually if you see accounts that don't have pictures on them and are just like tweeting something random with just a link, they're usually a bot. They're not worth clicking on. When it comes to the term BR, I haven't seen this that often, but it is still common, and it means best regards. And then a crank tweet. This is sort of one of those terms that I never understood, but still understood in a sense. So like I would see it and be like, what does that mean? But in the context, I sort of understood what it meant. And what it means is it's the same thing as a prank call, just a tweet. So you're sort of sending like a fake tweet to someone to try and get them to bite on it and comment. So EM stands for email me, and this will be used in more formal exchanges on Twitter. And then ICYMI, this stands for in case you missed it. And Twitter actually uses this itself sometimes because their feed is a little different in their layout. Instead of showing everything in chronological order, sometimes it'll be like, oh, you haven't been on Twitter for 5 hours. Let me show you the main things that happened on your timeline during this time. And then IMO and IMHO means in my opinion or in my humble opinion. So sometimes if people are just weighing in on topics that they're not like super qualified to talk about, they'll use this, or if they just want to share their opinion in general to their different followers. Now let's get into the basics of Twitter. Like I mentioned earlier, you can only use 280 characters max, and the best way to get around that is by using threads. It's essentially a loophole that helps you just share stuff like longer stories and so on to make sure that your audience is seeing all the content you want them to see. Now, hashtags increase your reach, and this ties into the trending page because you might be able to see on the slide, you might not, underneath, say, Portland moms, it says there's 11,000 tweets using right now. So you can see how popular it is and how many people are talking about it. And you can use that to get to different audiences. And then the trending page, again, that's just a tool that you want to utilize in other aspects of Twitter. And we talked about this earlier, was Twitter is a search engine first. Personally, I don't even look at it as a social media in a sense. Like I don't use Twitter the same as I use Facebook or Instagram. I use it more for searching different stuff and sort of seeing what's going on, being like, oh, what are people saying about the news? I'll use like the search feature in that sense. But it still has endless possibilities and not everyone has to use it the same way. And finally, and probably the most interesting aspect that ties into it being a search engine is it's an open conversation. By default, accounts are public. So that means that anyone essentially can comment on any topic posted by anyone. And that's what makes it such a good search engine, is because you can see what almost everyone on the website is saying unless they're private. And it just allows you to see a wide array of opinions on different topics. So what is Twitter about and what are the goals of tweets? Well, there's 3 main goals, and you don't have to hit all of these goals, but hitting one of them is a good idea. So you can either advance an idea, want to educate an audience, or entertain. So if you want to advance an idea, maybe you just want to be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. These are my plans. And you get an input from different people on Twitter because it's such an open audience. Maybe you want to educate people on a topic for a certain national day and be like, hey, 20 years ago, this specific event happened. Not that many people know about it. Let's spread more awareness. And you can utilize different hashtags as well. And that also ties into looking up what different national days there are. Because, for example, National Pizza Day, if you're a pizza parlor, is January 1st. So on January 1st, it wouldn't tie into educating as much, but you'd want to look at those different hashtags and tweet out on those different days specific things, because you're going to get more traction and Twitter's going to utilize those hashtags for trends. And then finally, entertain. My favorite example is Wendy's, for example. I don't know how many of you are on Twitter and follow Wendy's, but they're one of my favorite accounts to follow because they'll just randomly attack McDonald's. People will be like, oh, McDonald's is better. And they'll respond, be like, yeah, if you don't want quality food or if you want frozen burgers. And it's really entertaining because their marketing style is to just attack and roast competitors and stuff like that. And they know their audience, right? Because a lot of their audience on Twitter is people my age, and that's what we sort of like. So that's what it really comes down to, is just knowing who your audience is and how you want to approach different topics. And once again, just utilize that search engine to find who your audience is. So you can do that by looking up whatever your company is and seeing what people are talking about and what different accounts are talking about them. And you can look at their profiles and see what they're interested in and sort of see the profile specifically of the people you're targeting. And tying into the last point, Twitter really appeals to everyone. It just varies on their use. Like I said, I use it as a search engine. Some people I know really use it as their primary social media to tweet out different ideas. It really just depends. The one constant with Twitter is it's super fast paced. You could be gone for 2 hours and totally miss out on a joke or not understand what's happening or miss 3 trends. It's sort of like the thing is when, say, you go away on vacation for a couple of days or go up north camping, you don't have Wi-Fi or cell phone connection, and you come back and felt like you missed a whole month. Like everything just like seems like it changed and it's completely different. And that's what sort of happens with Twitter's news cycle. It just moves so fast. And because it's that open cycle and open to everyone, the conversations just constantly keep on moving. And sometimes it even feels like you're shouting into a vacuum because you could try and speak up on a topic and people have already moved on or don't hear you because there's so many different conversations about it going on. But that's also a benefit because there's so many different topics that are constantly being discussed on Twitter at one time. If you miss out on one or don't understand one or just don't like one, you can wait a couple hours and it's probably going to change. But overall, Twitter is really interconnected because of accounts being public by default and everyone just being able to speak on different topics no matter what. And that's also a downside to Twitter because people can speak on different topics no matter if they're qualified or not, and everyone can speak on them. And you can't really determine who follows you in a sense or who comments on these different topics. It cannot be the best for productive conversations depending on what you're talking about. So who cares what you say though? So it shows a different side of your brand when you're on Twitter. And this, once again, ties into my Wendy's example. No one would really think that an old brand like Wendy's would be attacking people on Twitter, but that's their marketing technique. And it shows that there's sort of this like fun brand that appeals to younger people as well. And there's 326 million monthly users on Twitter. So there's always a segment of the audience that you can tap into. No matter what, some people are going to care about what you're talking about. You just got to figure out how to connect with them and how to get them to want to connect with your brand. And when I think about like finding a specific audience, I think about this one time when my mom sent me this tweet from this pizza place. It was called Stubby's and it's actually located in London. And it was about people named Spencer get a free slice of pizza this day. And I was like really tempted to go, but didn't end up going, but still ended up following them on Twitter. And I think I ended up following them for a good year or so until I just like sort of saw one of their tweets and was like, what are they even talking about? Like, let me just unfollow them. But they were able to find a certain audience, people named Spencer, get me to follow them for a year. And the only reason why I unfollowed them was because I didn't like see a lot of their tweets and they just weren't tweeting consistently. And we'll get into that later. If they were tweeting more applicable content, I probably would have followed them. And realistically, I don't know how many times I would have went to their place, but I was still interested in that deal. And when I went to London, I would probably consider going to that place through a simple contest or draw they ran forever ago. And that also ties into just showcasing your brand because it showcases like how they care about people and what type of company they are through marketing online. And this can be seen through a variety of different companies, including Wendy's on Twitter. So the main benefits of Twitter really come down to generating leads and sales. Because there's such a wide audience for you to tap into, you want to make sure that you're entertaining this audience and connecting with them in a way that'll, at the end of the day, make them either go to your website, DM you about something, or at least be interested and keep your brand in the front of their mind when they come to your town. And that ties into increasing brand awareness. Just being on Twitter makes people more aware of you as a company. And if you know how to market to them well, like that pizza place, you're going to become more aware, and maybe subliminally when they go to your city or whatever, they're going to want to stop at somewhere and think about you first. Essentially, it's a free way to get advertising and get people to come into your store. Just a couple minutes of day sending different tweets could work out to different sales. And it also works to building customer support channels. So depending on your business, this may or may not be applicable, but let's think about airlines quickly, for example. Airlines oftentimes have a lot of issues, let's be honest here. And on Twitter, especially, people will be like, hey, Air Canada, you just lost my bag. What are you going to do about it? And Air Canada will reply super quickly like that and be like, hey, DM us, we'll help you out with it. And a lot of people prefer using Twitter to do this just because it's such a quick and open response way to solve different issues. And that helps people create a positive opinion about these airlines. If these places can respond quickly and help them deal with their issues, people are going to have a better opinion about them. And along with that, I had a great opinion about that pizza place because I'm like, oh, they like said Spencer's get free pizza one day. It was something super simple and I didn't even capitalize on it. And I still had this certain opinion about this company over something they did like a year ago. And then finally, you just want to build a community. If you can build a community and a bunch of people follow you who relate to your product, you'll find it way easier to build bigger. Essentially, Twitter's audience is exponential. Once you can get a couple people liking your stuff and retweeting it, people who follow them who share the same interests will start following you, and it'll expand and expand and expand. And it also just allows you to bounce different ideas off them, entertain, advance different ideas, and just be yourself overall. And building this larger audience ties into understanding the desires. Because if you follow a bunch of your customers, you can see what they like, what they're retweeting, and so on, to be like, oh, Jimmy, he's 18. He really likes going out to dinner with his friends. What if we made sure we had this certain product that applies to Jimmy? And it doesn't have to be like that specifically, but you can just really see what your customers are into by using Twitter. It's a free look into your demographics, essentially. And that also ties into researching your competitors. You can use the search engine feature of Twitter to search up what your competition is doing. You can be like, oh, I run an ice cream shop and my competitor is so-and-so. Let me look up what they're saying on Twitter. Oh, they're really interacting with their customers, or they're not interacting with them at all, and they just raised their prices because everyone's commenting about this ice cream place. Oh yeah, they just raised their prices. I don't like them anymore. You can use that information to your advantage. May it be just interacting with your customers more, or putting a sale on to attract these customers because this other place just increased their prices. And this ties into the public by default feature that I talked about earlier. Because Twitter is public by default, these people can see all your tweets, and you're not shouting into a vacuum in that sense, at least. Where on Facebook, if someone doesn't like your page or something like that, they're probably not going to end up seeing that you're hosting this sale unless you're paying for ads on Facebook. Where at least on Twitter, if you're tweeting this out and using the right hashtags and have built this community and people are retweeting your stuff, you're essentially getting advertising for free and reaching a larger audience. And those people can contribute to this ongoing conversation. You can get input from both people who follow you and people who don't follow you. And it just gives you a better insight into your audience as a whole. But at the end of the day, like anything, you get what you put into it. If you're consistently tweeting and looking at what your competitors are doing and what your customers desire, you're going to get out of it what you're putting into it. You're going to see an increase in sales. You're going to see a better community. And you're just going to feel like using Twitter benefited you. But even if you're not putting a whole lot of time in, but you're still like consistently tweeting a couple of times a day, and you're thinking maybe 10 minutes at lunch, you're still going to get a lot of benefits out of it. But you just got to know that the more time you put into it, the greater the benefits you're going to reap. Now let's dive into choosing a Twitter username. And I really like this example. So you can see that Matt Slack on the left has the name Slack. And Slack HQ didn't actually come around until 2013. So Matt Slack was on the website for what? An additional 7 years. So obviously when the website Slack came on and came out, they were like, oh, what do we do? And instead of freaking out and panicking about what they're going to do with their name, they simply just added a short like keyword to their name. They just changed it to Slack HQ, doesn't change their brand at all, and they get their point across still while being able to be recognized in the search engine. And that just ties into being consistent with your company, because HQ for Slack, because it's a communication center for different businesses ties really well into Slack's brand. So them adding that keyword actually is beneficial in a sense. Now, it'd be ideal if they could get the name Slack, but because there's so many Twitter users and Twitter has been around for so long, sometimes the name you want won't be there. So that's why you just got to be memorable as well, or be different. And sometimes that'll be hard to come up with, but if you find something you really like for a Twitter name, jump on it. Because there's so many different Twitter users, you want to make sure you jump on the opportunity when it's there. Because at the end of the day, if you have that Twitter name and don't like it, at least you have it for now. And when you come up with something better, you can change your name. But you don't want to just wait and hum and haw about it and then it disappear. That's the worst thing that could happen. So this ties into name variations. If you find a variation you like, jump on it. Maybe it's a shortened version of your name. Now Slack, for example, couldn't shorten it. That's why they used a keyword. And some companies may even use a location. Say if you're a local chocolate store, for example, and your name is Chocolate Bar, right? That's probably going to be taken. But if you go Chocolate Bar Woodstock, maybe that's not taken, or a shortened form of Woodstock. So you just want to do different things like that to make sure that you still are sort of informing your audience of who you are and staying true to your brand while differentiating enough to actually get that username you want. Now let's get into the hard numbers a little bit for increasing your followers. The number one thing that followers look for is if you're tweeting frequently. And this ties into the pizza shop I was talking about earlier. If they were tweeting frequently and had like a reason why they were tweeting, maybe if they were just trying to be funny and telling like a pizza joke of the day or something, I probably would have kept on following them, to be honest. But I don't know how often they really tweeted because I didn't see their tweets that much at all. And 92% of users on Twitter tweet once a day. Now, I'm not one of those people because I use it as a search engine, but this ties more into businesses and people who are trying to gain a following. 43% of them tweet 1 to 5 times a day, and 19% tweet 6 to 10 times a day. And the thing is, you got to understand that not everyone is going to see every single one of your tweets. That's why if you have a bunch of ideas that tie well together, you might want to use a thread. So if they see it, they're not going to get lost. But that's why it's important to tweet more than once a day, because maybe that pizza place was tweeting once a day and it was just getting lost in my timeline because I wasn't using Twitter primarily compared to like Instagram and different websites. So you want to make sure that you're at least tweeting a couple times a day if possible. And if you're just going to tweet once a day, or even if you're going to tweet multiple times a day, the best time is to tweet at 3 p.m. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure why 3 p.m. is the best time, but according to Twitter's analytics and Twitter's website, this is the time when it gets the most engagement for different things. And overall, the biggest takeaway you can take from this is the optimal range for tweeting is 3 to 7 times per day. But if you can't get to that, at least tweet once a day so that people know you're active and that you have a feed on your home profile showing that you've been tweeting every day and that you're talking about different things. So people aren't just like, oh, this is a dead account, why would I follow them? And tying into Twitter, building an audience and using it as a search engine, say if you're a real estate agent, for example, you could use it to search keywords or key phrases. So the example I have here is you can look up moving to and then your city or whatever, and you can see people who are like, oh, I'm moving to Woodstock, oh, I'm moving here, and you want to use different variations of that, then the real estate agent could DM them and be like, hey, I'm a real estate from the area. How can I help you? What can I do? It's a free way to market and find different people in your audience, and you could convert on a sale that way. So just finding different ways to utilize hashtags and search those, or search different key phrases on Twitter can help you find different people to tap into. And another thing that ties into this, tweets show up in Google search results. And this is what I was talking about earlier about search engine optimization. So you being active on Twitter actually contributes to you showing up more in like Google searches. And I was confused and curious when I first saw this statistic. So obviously I went and typed in Donald Trump, and you can see here that other than top news stories, the first thing that shows up is this Twitter feed. And I just thought that was really neat. And it also works for a bunch of different celebrities and a bunch of different companies. And it's just a way for people to see your brand showcased in a real and authentic way instead of through maybe a news article or something like that. And when it comes to getting exposure and showcasing who you truly are, you want to use visuals. So visuals overall get 150% more retweets. And retweets are the most valuable conversion on Twitter because say if I retweet something I see, now it comes up almost as a tweet from me to my followers. It'll say, Spencer retweeted this, but then it's getting to a whole different audience. So using images that are applicable to what you're posting is super important. And like GIFs are 55% more get more engagement than pictures overall. They're just really neat because they can be utilized to tap into different audiences as well, to use different pop culture references. And who doesn't really like a GIF? Like the one we have here, for example, it just draws your eyes to it. And if you're scrolling through Twitter and you see a bunch of tweets, then you see one with a GIF on it, you're going to stop and be like, oh, that's funny. Maybe I'll read the tweet. And it just draws more eyes to it. And then videos are retweeted 6 times more than regular tweets as well. So if you have a video to post on Twitter, it would be a great place to put it. And we'll talk more about this in a couple slides. But when you're sharing different types of media, like a video, for example, you're going to want to give a preview of it, like a sort of short blurb about what the video discusses, not just outline, yep, so we go through this, this, and this in the video. You sort of want to sell them on watching the video and get that conversion. And when you want to get more exposure, you want to use hashtags as well. But you don't want to use too many hashtags because sometimes it can get annoying and they use up a lot of characters. But hashtags, again, are really important to utilize because it can help pop you up to different audiences through the use of the trending page and so on. And they also let you engage with different audiences. Now, getting this exposure, you want to make sure that your profile is really inviting. So we have Wendy's here again to be the prime example of this. Just the red color for their Twitter banner makes it look really nice and open and inviting. And it just shows their personality in a little bit through their bio, because they say, we like our tweets the same way we like our hamburgers, better than anyone expects from a fast food joint. So they're sort of like, oh, like they sort of have a sense of humor on Twitter. This is sort of what the company is about. And you don't have to have a joke in your bio, but just sort of showing them what your company is about is really important with your bio. And you can use different words and different things in your bio. Like for Wendy's, they're going to want to make sure they maybe have fast food joint and burgers, because when people search them up, they'll see that in their bio. Now, again, for Wendy's, it's not as important because people know who Wendy's are. But for different types of companies and local businesses, you're going to want to make sure that you have those keywords that explain what your company does. So people from a glance can be like, oh, that's cool, I relate to that. Or, oh yeah, I need that product. And then having your location in your bio is super important as well, because at least people can see where you are. Even if they're not local, they can be like, oh, when I go to that town, maybe I'll stop by there. And it just gives them an idea in their mental map to be like, oh, yeah, I know there's this place in Woodstock. Yeah, they seem really cool. I should stop there sometime, or so on. And then I'm not a huge fan of using hashtags in bios, but if you have like one really good hashtag or 2 good hashtags, it's not a bad idea to put them in there. It just, if you put too many of them, they seem almost spammy. And that's one of the main things with hashtags. You don't want to seem spammy, but you want to utilize them well to get a larger audience. And when it comes to meeting customers' needs, you can see through this example on the right with Monica and Slack. And it shows Slack's personality in a sense here too, where they're just sort of having this back and forth conversation, trying to help their customers while being informal. And people love when you deal with their issues on Twitter when they bring it up to you first. And it also just helps you discover different customers' needs and what they're really into. But 63% of customers expect customer service on social media. So if you have Instagram and Facebook and people deal with issues there, that's great. But Twitter also allows you to showcase how well you're able to deal with people's issues, because it's public and people can see, oh, like they had this issue and that company responded within 20 minutes and they solved the issue immediately, like that's great. I really want to deal with them. They seem like a great company. Again, it's free advertising if you can deal with that issue really well. But you need to make sure you tailor your response. Because you only have those 280 characters, sometimes you can deal with the issue immediately or deal with it well through that exchange that you can see between Monica and Slack, but sometimes it may take more than 280 characters. So directing them to your DMs or to directly message you, like airlines often do, it's a good way to make the conversation more private if private information is being shared, or if you just need to discuss things in longer form. And no matter how you want to confront this issue and deal with it, if you want them to get them to directly message you, or if you want to deal with it on Twitter, 42% of people want a response within an hour. And you can set it up so you get notifications when people mention you to ensure that you can respond to them quickly. But it's just really important that you show the customers that they're of the utmost importance, especially on Twitter, because other people can see this as well. And you can also just create a relationship with customers and just show them that they matter through creating this different community on Twitter and showcasing your brand and how you interact with them. And a great way to interact with customers on Twitter is by using different things such as polls to see how they feel about different topics, or maybe you want to introduce a new product. So you could be like, hey, we're thinking about introducing this. What do you think? Yes, no, should we introduce this instead? It's just a great way to get opinions of different people on Twitter. And maybe you'll get more people outside of your community just to get a more diversified response. Now, Twitter tips. This one's really interesting. So just pay attention here because I didn't even know this and it's super important. When using mentions, there's a specific way to mention people. So in this picture on the right, you can see he @Patel232. And the way he mentioned Patel, only Patel and the mutual followers of the person who tweeted that, who also follow Patel, can see this tweet because he used @Patel. But if he used period before the @Patel, like I have @Bob here, then everyone who follows Bree would be able to see it instead of just the mutual followers. But my favorite way to use it is the best user is @Bob. If you have the mention at the end of your tweet, then it won't matter. Then everyone who follows you will be able to see that tweet, as well as Bob if he doesn't follow you. But you probably want to be tweeting at people for the most part who do follow you. But that it doesn't mean you can't tweet at larger people or larger companies as well. Now I just have a quick video here to quickly discuss hashtags and why they're sort of important. And then I'll go more into it in a second. So hopefully you enjoy.
Hey, Justin, what's up? How much do you chilling? We'll be working, #rise and grind, #is it Friday yet? Hey, Chico, where's the cookies? #homemade, #oatmeal raisin, #show me the cookie. Sweet. #don't mind if I don't. Pretty good. #get my cookie on. I'm the real cookie monster. Delicious, right? I did it all for the cookie. LOL. Classic. By the way, did you catch last week's episode of Duck Dynasty? #quack quack. No, lately I've mostly been watching Netflix. #Orange is the New Black. Oh, nice. I've been watching a lot of Barney the Dinosaur. #Purple is the New Black. #I love you, you love me. We're a happy family. #I'm 38. #dinosaurs. #how do we go extinct? #meteor. #Ice Age. Speaking of Ice Age, I just watched Ice Age on demand the other day. #funny. #Ray Romano. #Deborah. By the way, Halloween's only like a month away. I know. I mean, do you know where you're going to be at? #life decisions. #sexy ghost. I think I'm going to go as a Ninja Turtle. #gotta be Raphael. #Leonardo sucks. #the turtle, not the Italian Renaissance painter. #Mona Lisa. Is she smiling? Hashtag speaking of smiling, I just saw my dentist. Hashtag bling. Hashtag dental care. Hashtag cavity free. Hashtag that's how we do. Hashtag we go hard. Hashtag we can't stop. We won't stop. Hashtag we run this. Hashtag 2 plans for life. Hashtag is it worth it? Or let me work it. Hashtag put my thing down, flip it, then reverse it. Hashtag it's good for my never again. Hashtag it's good for my never again. Hey guys, yeah, Quest, what's up? Hashtag shut the fuck up.
So hopefully you guys enjoyed that video, because I know sometimes just hearing someone talk forever too, it's nice to get a break, because trust me, having all these online lectures, I feel for you. But let's get into hashtags now. And through that video, you can see that using hashtags excessively isn't fun, and you just come across as annoying. And using them just sparingly isn't actually helpful as well. But using them in a correct way that we'll talk about now, you can help increase your reach. And you can see that on the graph on the right, it shows the average engagement rates per post for the number of hashtags you use. You see it does diminish off after the first 2. So you can take from this, using 1 to 2 hashtags at least is important. If you want to use a third, you can, but making sure you use around 1 to 2 is probably the best. And pay attention to what's on the trending page, as well as what your mutuals are using. Because if you can see that your audience is using a certain hashtag, or maybe an audience that sort of intersects with your audience is using a hashtag, you might want to utilize that to bring in more people into your fold. But also this trick I sort of like, it's a little out there or different, but say there's a conference going on and you can't go to all the conferences you want. And especially with COVID going on, maybe you just don't have the time during your day to go to a certain conference. You can look up what the hashtag for, say, the food and beverage conference is, and you can engage in different conversations that are happening at that conference, even though you're not there. Because Twitter is open and people can talk about and engage in different conversations no matter what, if they went to these events or not. You can talk with the people who are at this conference who might relate to your product and get new followers from the comfort of your own home or business. And hashtags are your search engine optimizations. So that's what I mean by when you're looking up these different conference hashtags, these help you search in and dial in to your customers and who you really want to target. Overall, hashtags get 12.6% more engagement than a post without a hashtag. So you want to make sure you're using a couple of hashtags to draw more people in. Now, when you're using links, this is another great way to draw more people into your posts, but you want to be careful. First of all, like I mentioned earlier, they do use up 23 out of your 280 characters when you're tweeting. So you don't want to add a link just for the sake of adding one. And along with that, 59% of all links on Twitter aren't ever clicked. So you want to make sure that you're using links in a good manner and that you're using them in a way to attract more people to actually look at what you're linking, instead of just using it to post a link to be different. One thing that I see people do a lot, which I don't really understand, is they'll find something on Twitter, for example, through using the desktop version, and they'll copy the URL link and then post that into their tweet. And sometimes Twitter converts it to look like a retweet, and sometimes Twitter will just leave it as a link. And half the time I can't be faced to actually click on that link, where if you see something interesting that you want to like share to your followers, you can retweet it and it just shows up better. But the best way to share stuff to your audience, if you want to retweet it, is to actually quote tweet it. And this just allows you to offer a quick insight and write a little blurb above that tweet or above that article that you found posted by someone else. And it just offers them more insight into why they should be looking at it. Now, Twitter has this new feature they're slowly rolling out. Is you can see on the left here, they're ensuring that people have read an article before they're retweeting it. So if they haven't seen that you clicked on this article link on Twitter, they'll be like, hey, headlines don't tell the full story. Have you read this article yet? Maybe you should read it. And it's to help make sure people are educated when engaging in this open conversation on Twitter. So it's a cool initiative happening on Twitter. And it's one thing to keep in mind before you're sharing stuff, is making sure that you're reading your articles and make sure that they fully tie into what you want to share. And when you want to share something, make sure you give a preview. Don't just link it and be like, yep, go for it, whatever. You're probably not going to get the same amount of engagements as giving sort of like a preview trailer for what's happening. And it'll interest people more in what you're talking about. Now we're coming to near the end of the presentation, and this is some of the more advanced Twitter techniques, but I still feel like they're important for you to know about. So we're going to dive into Twitter analytics, and these tell you how effective your use of Twitter is. So on Twitter itself, you can see the impressions as well as the option to promote your tweets. In the bottom right of a tweet, you can click, I believe it's a little down arrow, and it'll tell you how many impressions you've got on this tweet, how many people have liked it, as well as retweeted it. It just gives you a quick overview of how many people have sort of seen your tweet and how well it's doing. And you can have the option to promote your tweets. I probably wouldn't suggest it on Twitter, for example, because Twitter is so open and you can use the search engine feature essentially on Twitter as a free way to market. Now, Twitter Analytics is its own sort of website that you have to go on your computer to access, or I guess you could access it on your phone, but you got to search it up and enter your Twitter username and password. And it just gives you a little more in-depth information. It shows you your top tweet. It can show it for the month or overall. So you can sort of dive into what makes that tweet effective and why people really like it. Your top mentions, so who mentions you the most. Maybe that you can use that to target a specific audience or see how you're not engaging them. And then your top follower, so who has been interacting with most of your posts. And maybe you can offer them a special discount or reach out to them and be like, hey, have you bought any of your products? How do you like them? Because at least you know that person is really following you and paying attention to your account. The number of tweets sent is also an important statistic if you really want to dive into looking at how well you're doing on Twitter, because maybe you're seeing engagements not that high and not doing too well. So you're like, oh, I haven't been sending out that many tweets. Like I've only sent out like 35 tweets for the month. Like I think I got to pump up my number a little bit, because that'll tie into getting more people to visit your profile, which you can also see through Twitter Analytics. And getting those people to your profile also converts to getting new followers. So at the end of the day, that's the thing you want to aim for, is getting people to your profile. And then you can see how many people are coming to your profile and how many new followers you have. And maybe you need to optimize your bio because they're getting to your profile, but they're not following you. And you can really use this information to extrapolate and look at the number of, through using the number of impressions you're getting or your conversion tracking, which is specifically how many people are converting on sales if you're using, say, Twitter, like to promote and use ads. They'll have more in-depth things, but everything except the conversion tracking is free features essentially on Twitter that you can utilize for your brand. And once again, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't use Twitter to promote. That's your own choice. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of good free features on Twitter that you can use to promote and further your brand no matter what. And it'll show you, for example, a 28-day overview or a monthly overview of different interactions. So you can look at different statistics and be like, oh, this day I did really well. What did I do on this day? And you can use that free information to better your brand overall. Now, just some final takeaways for the presentation. One of the main things is make sure you're optimizing your profile, because you want people to come to your profile, look at it, and be like, yeah, I want to follow that person. They seem cool, as well as utilizing other feeds, because you probably have different accounts set up. Maybe you don't have a Twitter account, maybe you do, or maybe your Twitter account doesn't have the same amount of followers as Facebook or Instagram. And you can utilize your other feeds, be like, hey, we're on Twitter, come check us out. We talk about these different cool things and we engage in more conversations with our customers here. And you can maybe get more people to follow you on Twitter, because like I mentioned earlier, if you have a bigger following base on Twitter, it grows exponentially, because those people may retweet and get more people to follow you. It's just easier to grow the bigger you are. So if you can reach out to your already existing followers, that's a great way. And that ties into marketing your Twitter on your other feeds. Maybe you want to add your Twitter handle at the bottom of emails too, or different things. Just making sure that your audience knows about your Twitter is really important. And then tweeting consistently. So it's great if you can tweet like 3 to 4 times a day, but it's not the best thing if you're tweeting like 7 times on a Wednesday and then no other times during the week. Because those 7 times, maybe your followers will only see 3 or 4 of those tweets, but then they won't see you for a week. And then that just keeps on happening. Where if you're tweeting like 2 to 3 times a day, at least you're constantly sort of popping up and you're staying relative to them. And also you can not miss out on as many big things that are happening on Twitter. And again, quote tweet over retweet, just to make sure that you're engaging people on your different posts. And talking about engaging, you can tag different followers. You can tag your top follower. Say if you want to talk to them about something or reach out to them, or be like, you can tag a brand and be like, hey, we really like what you're doing. There's so many different possibilities with this. And talking about tagging and talking to your followers, respond to when your mentions. So respond to when your followers mention you in different posts, because this ties into them maybe having an issue or different things like that. And then when you're using and tweeting different things out, make sure you're using specific niche words or things that really tie into your audience and that are specific to your brand or sector, because Twitter is a search engine. So when people search for specific stuff with that brand, they're going to want to try and be specific when searching. So if you can specifically have that word in a tweet, and don't force it, but if you have a word like that in your tweet, maybe people will stumble across your tweet and find your brand, and you'll gain a new customer that you didn't have before. Now, one of the most important things, no matter the social media, is write and edit. You want to make sure you look over your tweets before you send them. And Twitter has this function where you can archive tweets so that you can go back and be like, oh, I liked this. Like this tweet came to my mind a while ago. I didn't think it was the right time. And then you can post it. But it's also a great way to come back and edit it and revise it to make sure that it sounds right and that it just has good grammar. And also you want to make sure you show your personality on Twitter, because that's what people are buying into on this website. Is they just want to see your brand and see how you showcase yourself. And finally, follow people on Twitter. People love to be followed back. So if someone follows you, maybe follow them back, follow new people that just expand your brand. But hopefully you guys like this presentation and learned something about it. Now we're going to move into questions.
I don't see any questions. And that may be, Spencer, maybe you covered everything for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if everybody's just sort of, because we've got another one right at 2 o'clock and it's almost 2 o'clock. Does anybody have any questions? You can unmute yourself.
If you don't, that's fine too. I'm not offended.
And if you do, they can reach out to you at the Small Business Center afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for attending, and I hope you found this informative.